and share my screen. All right, so today we are going to talk about chapter 1. I know in your reading, you were also supposed to, read chapter 4. I'm not going through chapter 4. A lot of that is for you in terms of writing strategies, and the ethical considerations are things for you to consider as you are going through the development of your research project this semester. And a lot of the information in there, just hint, hint, it could help you with like your limitations section and the ethical assurances sections that you need to think about once you get to like your chapter 3 with the methodology. So keep those things in mind. So chapter 1 is the selection of the research approach. Today, I am expecting you to be able to present and talk about your research topic, and we will connect that to research approach and paradigms, as we will talk about that in just a moment. So this semester, our book really talks about 3 key terms when we're talking about how to design a research study. And the first of which, I tried to develop this to look more like an umbrella kind of approach where you start with something that's more broad and get specific, which is why you see the arrows here. But the first one is research approaches. And this is kind of the broadest way of thinking about your research project, your dissertation research. And what the research approach is the plans and the procedures for your research, and it spans several steps. And we will discuss the 3 different research approaches that we see in just a moment. So beyond that, because that's the broadest description of research design or our approach to developing research, we go from a research approach to a research design. So the research design are the procedures that you use for your research inquiry. And so once you select an approach, the next step is to look at the specific types of inquiry that can be associated with that type of an approach. And that would be your research design. Again, we're going to talk about all of that today. The third way or key term that's used to describe how you develop your research project would be research methods. And your research methods, this is when you get down to the details of everything, the specifics. This is how when you lay out specifically how you plan on collecting data, how you're going to analyze that data. This includes how do you select your participants, what instruments you're using, all of that encompasses your research methods. And then last, I put at the bottom, research problem. And I added research problem here is because your research problem is as important as all the rest of these pieces when we're talking about how to design your dissertation research project. Your research problem, a problem is an issue. So that's one thing that I want you to think about throughout the whole semester. Whenever we talk about a problem statement or I ask what's the problem, it's an issue. And so if it's worded as anything, if it's worded as a question, that's not an issue. If it's worded as what you plan on doing, that's not an issue. Think about the research problem is an issue that is being addressed or an issue that needs to be addressed that's associated with STEM education research. Now, there are 3 approaches to research that our textbook discusses. And the key takeaway that I want you to know about these 3 approaches is there is no hard line. You don't see anything here that separates these different approaches. They occur on a continuum. And what it really means is on one end of the spectrum is qualitative approaches, whereas on the other end of the spectrum are quantitative approaches. And then somewhere mixed in between those two are what we consider to be mixed method approaches. So when we think about that extreme left end of the continuum, and we look at qualitative research approaches, there are some characteristics that come into play within the qualitative approach. The first of which is qualitative approaches focus on understanding meaning. That's the main idea when you're thinking about the type of researcher that you are, the kind of questions that you want to ask, that you want answered in your work. For qualitative, it's an understanding of the meaning behind something, the meaning that something has. Qualitative approaches also use emerging questions. When we think about emerging, for me, I think about emerging being the opposite of something that's established, right? When we think about emerging artists, we think about up and coming people that are trying to make their way in the field, emerging researchers trying to make their way in the field at this point. So with qualitative approaches, they use emerging questions. So these are questions that are not necessarily, established or traditional types of questions that are being asked. They're emerging, they're new, upcoming, because we want to understand the meaning of something. Qualitative approaches collect data in the participant's setting. So between the research and participant, there's usually some kind of relationship that's established for the researchers to be in the participant setting. And that's a whole nother can of worms to talk about once we get to qualitative approaches a little later. They also use inductive approaches to analysis. And when we're talking about inductive reasoning, we're talking about how researchers will make broad generalizations based on specific observations that they've made. And so as a qualitative researcher, again, you're collecting data in the participant setting and you're making these specific observations within the participant setting, and you're making these broad generalizations, about the observations that you've made. And one of the most important things I want you to remember with a qualitative approach is that written report is flexible in structure. And so throughout this semester, we talk about, in general, what a chapter 2 looks like, what a chapter 1 looks like, what a chapter 3 looks like in this 5-chapter idea of a dissertation. But your project may have a spin to it that doesn't quite fit into pieces that we discussed this semester. And so it's completely understandable that sometimes it's, well, Dr. Jones, I know you said this, and this was supposed to be here. However, my work, I don't think that's going to fit there. And that doesn't work for me like that. So I put it over here, or I took that out. Okay. The goal is for you to be able to defend why you're doing something or why you're not doing something. As long as you have a reason behind it and that reason makes sense, I can't argue with you. But if you just say, oh, I just didn't want it to go there, or I didn't do it, and there's not a proper justification for it, then that's when problems happen and points are taken away. So just keep in mind that with a qualitative approach, there may be some flexibility in how that written report is done, and the structure might be a little different. In the quantitative approach, quantitative approaches test theories. So you usually have this theoretical framework that you have that's based on established theories, and you are testing variables that are related to that in the context of your project. One way to do that would be examining relationships among these different variables. Typically with quantitative work, we know that there is some kind of survey instrument or questionnaire or some other type, or like test questions, exams, or whatever, but it's some kind of instrument that's going to produce numbered data for you. You think quantitative, you think quantity, you think numbers. So numbered data. Typically always, there's statistical analysis of that data that you have. And so your data analysis section really has to describe the type of statistics that you plan on using in order to analyze the data that you are collecting. In this quantitative approaches, I told you they test theories, these established theories and this theoretical framework that you have, but it's done in a deductive way. So, excuse me, when we talk about deduction, we know that we start with this general statement. In quantitative work, the research questions will have hypotheses for it. And so you start with this hypothesis, and then you are collecting data and testing it out to test the hypothesis to see if that theory is going to hold to be consistent with your way of doing your research based on what the other people have done to develop that theory. And typically with quantitative work, you're going to see the structure that we talk about throughout this semester. You're going to see this set structure for that. So as you can see, they're on like two different ends of the spectrum: qualitative, quantitative, and then next approach, we have mixed methods that is kind of somewhere in the middle. And so with mixed methods, the key thing to remember is, yes, it is both quantitative and qualitative data, but the key piece is, in some kind of way, depending on the type of mixed method inquiry you're using, there is an integration of the two forms of data. So it's not like I have this quantitative question and all this quantitative data over here, but then I have this other qualitative question over here, and I'm gonna collect qualitative data over here, and then I'm gonna call this mixed methods. That's not how it works. Like, in order for it to be a true mixed method approach, there has to be at least some research question in there that forces you to integrate the two forms of data collection in order to be able to answer that question. So keep that in mind as we continue throughout the semester. There are distinct designs. I talk about research inquiries. There are distinct designs for mixed methods. And the goal of mixed methods is to be able to yield additional insight to your research problem that you wouldn't be able to do with quantitative or qualitative alone. So it's this extra layer that gives you deeper insight on your problem. So I'm gonna pause. Are there any questions so far, as I've only kind of just given you an overview of the three approaches?
Dr. Jones, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just have one question about the mixed method. The research question, which is pushing us to both the methods, will be, will come under the mixed method, right? Both quantitative and qualitative. But I'm wondering if there is like one research question is based on quantitative, and the second research question is based on qualitative. I don't think that will be considered as mixed, right? Will it be considered as a mixed method, mixed approach?
So what you'll see in, I believe, chapter 10 is the mixed methods chapter. But what you'll see in terms of guidelines by Cresswell and Cresswell is typically you'll have one question that is quantitative focus, one question is qualitative focus, but that third question would be a question that forces you to integrate both forms of data to answer it. But if you don't have that third question, then that's not a mixed methods approach. It's just you doing multiple, like multi-mode method or something. I forget the terminology for it, but it's not mixed methods.
Okay, we can still have that, right? Like one is quantitative, one is qualitative. And if I don't have the third one based on the mixed, is it something like it shouldn't be done that way, or that the study can be?
So I can't answer that specifically because it depends on the details.
Okay.
So I will say, yes, there are some studies that have just multi-mode in terms of the types of questions that are asked, but it depends on the actual study.
Okay.
Know how to, whether that third question is there or not.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? All right, so, excuse me. So when we talk about an approach, we just talked about the three approaches you see here in the middle: qualitative, quantitative, mixed methods. But in order to really describe these approaches, there are three different components that help frame our approaches. And so the following slides you're going to see is really about these three different components that are involved in the approach. The first of which is the philosophical worldview. And so when we think about a philosophical worldview, that's you as a researcher. What are your beliefs about the world and the nature of research? What do you believe? And once you have a solid understanding of what you believe about the nature of research and the beliefs about that, it'll then help you really think about what type of research approach would best fit who you are as a researcher. On the next slide, we'll talk about the 4 common worldviews, but I'm gonna see if this link actually works, and I hope you're gonna be able to hear the sound if it works. Pause, wait, go back.
I'm obsessed.
I'm assuming you're still on a PowerPoint and you can't see this, so let me shift to here.
I will be living my summer dreams through this bracelet
Can you hear the sound? Okay.
set. This is my stack.
Doing a research project can be daunting, especially when you have to learn a whole set of new terms. In this video, I will explain the relationship between research paradigm, ontology, and epistemology. In the simplest terms, the following picture describes the relationship between ontology, epistemology, and research paradigm. So what does ontology and epistemology mean? Well, ontology examines the nature of reality, while epistemology examines how you can examine reality. Ontology is interested in addressing the question, what is reality? There are several ontologies that exist. For the purposes of this video, I will use these 3 ontologies. Firstly, the belief that there is only one single reality or truth. Secondly, the belief that there are multiple realities. Thirdly, that reality is constantly negotiated, debated, or interpreted. Epistemology refers to how an individual understands knowledge, how they understand their own thinking process, and how they think others know. In other words, epistemology addresses the question, how can I know reality? There are several different epistemologies that exist. For the purposes of this video, I will use these 3 epistemologies. Firstly, the belief that knowledge can be measured using reliable designs and tools. Secondly, the belief that reality needs to be interpreted to discover the underlying meaning. Thirdly, that knowledge should be examined using whatever tools are best suited to solve the problem. When you combine your ontology and epistemology together, you are able to get a holistic view of how you understand knowledge. This is what we mean when we refer to a research paradigm. Using the three ontologies and three epistemologies I mentioned before, I will now show you how these combine to form the three most common research paradigms in social sciences: positivism, constructivism, and pragmatism. Positivists have the ontology that there is one single reality or truth, and the epistemological stance that knowledge can be measured. In contrast, constructivists believe that there are multiple realities, and the epistemological stance that knowledge needs to be interpreted to discover the underlying meaning. Finally, pragmatists believe that reality is constantly negotiated, debated, or interpreted, and the epistemological stance that knowledge should be examined using whatever tools are best suited to solve the problem. Once you have determined your research paradigm, you are able to establish the approach and methodology that is best suited to examine the knowledge you are interested in. This is why it is important to understand your research paradigm. It will improve the quality of your research.
Writing's not that easy, but grammar.
Okay, so I picked that video because I like the way they actually divide everything up and break it down. And I do want to pause for a moment and allow you time to kind of think about that and think about how when she talked about ontology in terms of what is reality, whether you believe that there is only one reality, there are multiple realities, or like there's constant change in what is considered to be reality. And then epistemology is how that reality is measured, whether there's this certain set of tools that are used to measure that, whether, or do you need to, what was the second one? Kind of think about, there are different tools that you can choose from to do the measuring. And then the last one was really kind of thinking about me and my pregnancy brain and completely forgetting what the lady just said in the video. So thinking about those two pieces and leading to your worldview, we are going to shift to worldview in just a second, but I wanted you to think about this for you, because what I see a lot of students do is select a research approach and then they try to throw in a worldview and explain that in terms of a research approach. And these are different things. So I want you to walk away with the understanding that the philosophical worldview is, I put / research paradigms because you hear it also referred to as a research paradigm. But this is you as a researcher, and what do you believe about reality and the world and the nature of research? That is different than the approach that you choose. However, it influences the approach that you choose. I can tell you, for me, I believe that there are multiple realities because I don't think everyone sees something the same way. So I think for one person, the reality of a certain situation can be completely different than the reality of the same situation for another person. So I believe that there are multiple realities when we think about the nature of research and what people think is real for them in that situation. I believe that there are multiple ways of measuring that reality, and that part of that should also be influenced by the actual participants that we are measuring. And so I don't know if I could say that I am a true constructivist, I guess, based on that, because there is some flexibility that I feel in terms of the pieces of the epistemology in terms of how we measure reality that she was talking about, that I don't exactly agree with what was said for all of those. And so when we talk about the common worldviews or research paradigms, she talked about positivism. In the book, it really talks about post-positivism, and how my interpretation of that, I really just connected to the scientific method, and that there is a specific method and specific tools that are used to measure things. And I connected to quantitative work because that's how things are viewed, that there is a theory, there are tools in place and numbers, and we're using that in order to actually test a theory that is already in place. Constructivism, again, you see the first bullet point says understanding. If you remember the qualitative approach, the focus is understanding the meaning of something. And so really understanding what participants mean by certain things. So going back to thinking about the multiple reality and the place that the participants actually, the meaning that they attach to different situations. So the meaning that they attach to their reality. And then pragmatism is, so the bottom two, actually pragmatism is the one that's more closely associated with mixed methods work. And transformative is similar to pragmatism, but it has a specific social justice or political justice type of focus to it, because the whole idea is to walk away with a change, like you're trying to change something. That's why it's transformative. You're trying to transform, something in terms of the research. That's where you see things like collaborative or participatory action research as a research inquiry for people who have transformative worldviews, because they are choosing to do different approaches and specifically different research methods that will end up with some kind of change that's related to the research problem that they're addressing. And so those are the 4 worldviews. Usually I take this time to kind of talk about it, but because you have presentations to do, I'm gonna kind of pause on that, and we'll talk about it as you are talking about your presentations once I finish with this. So that was philosophical worldviews. The other component that's involved, that was the first component. The second component that's involved in the research approach is the research design. And your research design is the type of research inquiry that is chosen based on the approach that you're doing. And so when you say you're doing a qualitative study or a quantitative study or a mixed method study, within each of those approaches, there are a variety of specific types of inquiry that gives you specific direction for what procedures you should be doing. For example, when we're talking about a quantitative approach, you can say, oh, I'm gonna I'm gonna take the quantitative approach to my research, my next question would be, okay, what type of quantitative design are you gonna use? And that's when we're talking about the inquiry. It can be an experimental design. It could be survey research. It could be a longitudinal design. When we talk there, and these, again, from Cresswell, this Cresswell book is just an overview. There are other people, and I'm gonna give you my spiel on that a little later. There are other people who've done more quantitative work, and there are other inquiries. And that's for all of these, that these aren't the only ones. These are the most common ones and the ones that you'll see more often, but they're not the only ones. And so with qualitative work, and I'm sure you talked about it in your qualitative course, they talk about the 5 different qualitative designs. There's more qualitative designs, but these 5 are usually the ones that are categorized because they are the most common. And so within a qualitative, if you say, oh, I'm gonna take a qualitative approach to my research, I say, okay, well, what type of qualitative inquiry or qualitative design will you use? Because you need to be able to explain that in your chapter 3. When you talk about your research methodology, you need to be able to explain your research design that you're choosing, and who developed it, the pros and cons of it, all of that goes in chapter 3. And so narrative research, phenomenology, grounded theory, ethnography, and case study are some that you see, but for example, there's also autoethnography. Phenomenology has different subsections of phenomenology, like transcendental and I think hermeneutics. But within this, you need to have an understanding of which design. So once you decide on the approach that you're using, and mixed methods, same thing, there are different designs. Once you decide which approach, you need to know, well, which design am I using under that approach? And I'm gonna pause and go to my spiel on, once I figure out where are my notes. Okay, I'm gonna pause right here so I can give my spiel on chapter 3 and citations. And so, yes, we use the Cresswell and Cresswell research design book. I had to put, hold on, my gallery back up so I can see y'all on the side here. Yes, we use the Cresswell and Cresswell research design book in this class. However, as a PhD student who is becoming an expert, not only in your research topic, but also in the research methodology that you're choosing to pursue for your dissertation research, our expectation is for you to take a deep dive into that research methodology. I'm not saying you have to do that for the equivalent of the perspectives, as in before your qualifying exams, cite Cresswell, it's fine. However, before you get past your proposal, those citations have to be specific for the methodologist who actually created that type of inquiry and are doing work in that area. What you will find out is, as you take a deeper dive into these different types of inquiry, Cresswell and Cresswell weren't the ones who created these. They are the ones that this is more of a secondary source, whether they combine, like, think about it as a lit review for how to write a research paper. That's basically what this textbook is. But as you go through the textbook, you will see that they cite people who are doing the work. And so for you, that proposal stage, the dissertation stage, you need to know who the actual methodology people, researchers are, and what they're doing in their work. So that's my spiel, because I still see when some students write the proposal, they have Cresswell and Cresswell cited as, you know, survey research and using Cresswell and Cresswell work. And it's like, nope, you need to go tell me who created that, why, or who are the people using it now in terms of adding to the field for that particular method. So does anyone have questions about what I just said for that? Because that's coming up often, and I want to be clear in Cresswell and Cresswell is great for what we're doing in class in terms of learning, but for you as an expert, you will need to take a deeper dive into who is actually doing the work to develop these methods. No questions on my spiel? Okay.
I have something. Are you saying that we should investigate other researchers besides Cresswell?
Yeah, I am saying that.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, I just want to make sure I understood what you were talking about. Okay.
And even like in the Cresswell book, once you get to chapter 3, chapter 3 in the proposal, the information corresponds to, I believe it's chapter 8, 9, and 10 in the Cresswell book, which is the qualitative methods, quantitative methods, and mixed methods chapters in the textbook. When they talk about each of these designs, they cite people. So it's just a matter of going back to cite who's doing work. For example, phenomenology, I believe Moustakis is one of the people, not the one who created it in the beginning, but definitely one of the people who in recent years have been doing some work. And if you're doing anything related to phenomenology and I don't see a citation for Moustakis, I got questions. But also, I don't know all the people doing all the work, but that's one of the things that I will do a Google search on to check students about that, because, you know, we can't go forth in really like submitting dissertations and then only having these secondary sources that are being cited. That's not okay. Like, I want to make sure that the students we're graduating are well-breast on understanding who the people are who are doing the methods that they are doing in the dissertation. Mr. Sharma, you have a question?
Yes, I had a question. What you just mentioned about the secondary source and primary source of information, does this apply for quantitative research also, or is it only for qualitative research?
It's for all of the research approaches. So
Okay.
whatever approach you decide on, when you decide on your research design, my advice is then to go find other books that focus on that design. They have textbooks that are specifically about survey research. They have textbooks that are specifically about case study research. They have, you know, things that are specifically about different types of mixed methods, whether it's convergent or exploratory sequential. But there are people who are doing this work to have a deeper understanding in the methodologies who deserve to be cited. And I only mention the qualitative people offhand because that's the work I've been doing. So that's the work that I'm more familiar with.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And another quick point, for example, and again, it's another qualitative example, but when you talk about coding, I see some people talk about coding and will cite Cresswell, and I'm like, no, there is like Saldania. I can't even think of his first name right now. that has a whole textbook, like a manual on how to do coding. But there are different people who actually have books and resources available that focus on these specific research designs. And those are the people that you should be citing. Any other questions about that before we move on? And again, pre-qualifying exams, as you are developing this, my advice would be, of course, go ahead and look deeper into the people who are doing these designs, but I do understand workload and timing. And perhaps during the qualifying exam process, your committee is like, well, maybe you should think about a different design. And so pre-qualifying exam, you can very well cite Cresswell, and also the people that Cresswell cite as, so-and-so as cited in Cresswell research design. You can do it that way. That's fine. But once the committee is like, okay, this research design works, that's what you're going to focus on, then you need to really focus on that research design and make sure you know all the ins and outs of it, which include the people who are the major players in that particular research design. So I wanted to be clear about that just up front, just as an FYI, as you continue through the process. So you'll know, and you've at least heard it before, and I'll probably say it again multiple times, but you'll know. So with research methods, that's the third component. So the first component was philosophical worldview. The second component was the research design or the inquiries. This third component is research methods. Research methods, again, that's the detailed stuff, the specific information. And so it goes from this data collection where, you have to talk about your instrument, what instruments you're going to use, or what observations or interview protocols, or the types of participants and the settings, all of that, or your population description, all of that is connected to data collection. Also the analysis, what type of analysis that you're using. And then how do you plan on interpreting what your findings are to connect back to your research questions. So all of those are pieces of research methods. And that's the third component when we're talking about these different research approaches. And that's because all of these different pieces are different depending on the type of approach that you use. And so when we look at methods in terms of these different approaches, we know, again, with quantitative and this post-positivism worldview and this one reality and one way of measuring things, the approach for that in terms of a quantitative approach, you would then correctly assume that the methodology, the methods for that would be predetermined. So if it's a survey inquiry, then you know the method that's going to be used is going to be some kind of survey, some kind of quantitative survey. And you would use specific questions that are there that are close-ended questions. And so this chart is really just comparing the different components of the methods for you to know, like, what the data collection components, the data analysis components, and the interpretation of it. And that's again, once we get to the different types of inquiry a little later, or as you read more and understand more about which one you want to use for your work, that's when you'll start seeing the differences in the different types and what they mean. And this is important because you can't tell me, oh, I'm gonna do a quantitative approach, and you decide to do survey method, and then you pick a survey that has open-ended questions, and it's like, wait a minute, you said you're doing quantitative approach, so how you gonna do open-ended questions? That's qualitative. What are we doing here? Unless you have some kind of creative way in order to convert those open-end questions to close-end or numerical responses for the quantitative, which you can do it, but you need to be able to explain that. And so what I'm saying is, for each of the decisions that you make, you have to have an understanding of the approach and all three components of the approach, including the methods piece and the different pieces that are associated with that approach, so that you can justify what you're doing and why you're doing it. These slides. So I think I want to, well, so this one kind of connects the three components of the research approach. And what we see is, in a qualitative approach, again, going back to the philosophical worldview, when you talk about who you are as a researcher, you likely believe that there are multiple realities and there are different ways to measure this reality. And so that lends itself to you having a constructivist or a transformative worldview. So that aligns with a qualitative approach. Within that, you would choose one of the qualitative inquiries depending on how you want to collect data and what types of questions that you're asking, in which you want to have an understanding of a deeper meaning for, because remember, that's qualitative approach. And in terms of methodology, we know that you would have open-ended questions or observations, you're collecting data in a participant setting, all of that. Typically you have text or image, video, et cetera, data for the qualitative approach. Quantitative, again, as a researcher, if your approach is there's one reality and there's set ways to measure that reality, then you would likely take a quantitative approach to things. And it could be a survey design and experimental design. I will say an experimental design is a little tricky to do when you're dealing with humans. So it could be a quasi-experimental design as well, but there are different inquiries that you can use for a quantitative approach. And the methodology for that, you will have closed-ended questions. Remember, it'll be numerical data. And the analysis for that will be statistical analysis and a statistical interpretation of that analysis. Mixed method is this pragmatism in terms of who you are as a researcher, that there are different ways to measure the reality. There are different ways to measure the multiple reality based on the actual participants. Like, you want to choose what type of methods that you're using for the reality that you are positioning yourself to ask questions about. And so within that, again, there are different types of inquiry for mixed methods, and you would have both open and closed-ended questions in the data collection process. And it's really just a mixture of the two that we previously discussed. So that's an example of how those three different components come together to describe the three different research approaches. Now, criteria. I think this last set of slides here are really about the criteria that you use for selecting a research approach. And when, in terms of a research problem and your research question, you would typically use a quantitative approach when you're trying to identify factors that influence an outcome. You're trying to evaluate an intervention, or in this case, you're trying to understand the best predictor of a particular outcome. Excuse me. Oh. In terms of a qualitative approach, when your research problem and your questions, for your research problem and your questions, if you have a newer topic where there's not a lot of information about, then it's probably best to have a qualitative approach. The subject may not have been addressed with your particular sample. That may lend itself to a qualitative approach. Or if there are existing theories that are related to the topic, but don't actually apply to your topic, it may lend itself to you selecting a qualitative approach. Now, in terms of the research problems and questions for the mixed methods approach is probably better when neither one of the other two can adequately give you the information that you want about your research problem, and that you would actually strengthen your case and have a deeper understanding of the problem if you use both approaches. That's usually when mixed methods is best. Other criteria for selecting a research approach would be personal experiences. Again, this kind of goes back to your philosophical worldview and what you think. But beyond that, in terms of personal experiences, it depends on the training that you kind of have. Perhaps you love numbers and you want to focus on numbers, and that may lead you to selecting a more quantitative approach. Or you really are just an inquisitive person who likes to ask questions and want to really know more about things. That may lend you to a more qualitative research approach. Time is another thing. Perhaps you don't have, another 2 years to work. And so, taking a grounded theory, a qualitative inquiry approach, like that won't work for you because that really takes some time. But perhaps there is some quantitative data sets that are already in place with variables that you're interested in. Perhaps, because of that, you choose a quantitative research approach. Resources and experiences could be just because of how you're positioned in terms of if you're teaching certain courses or, interacting with certain students and you have questions about that, that means your experiences would help you determine which research approach you're selecting based on the circumstances that you are in and what you have available to you. Your audience is another criteria. In your case, your audience is your faculty committee. Your faculty committee is a major criteria for you selecting a research approach. It perhaps is certain members of the committee have certain experiences in certain things, and they want you to have a research approach that lends itself to aligning with their experiences, or that's really the focus here. The other things are important too, but for your purposes, it's really the faculty committee piece and making sure that you have a committee who will support the research approach that you're choosing, and they have experiences or skill sets that can help you along the way with that. So in summary, what we went through today is, first, we talked about a research approach as this big umbrella of where we're starting off with in terms of our research and designing our dissertation research. And with that approach, we talked about 3 different types of approach that occur on a continuum, whether it's qualitative or quantitative and mixed methods somewhere in the middle. We talked about the 3 different components that comprise of our research approach. And this includes the philosophical worldview or the research paradigm, as well as the research design or inquiry, and then the research method, which includes data collection, analysis, interpretation, population sample settings, all of that. And then we talked about what factors can help influence the choice that you make in terms of the approach, whether it's the type of research problem that you are studying or personal experiences that you have and situations and resources that are connected to you, or whether it's your audience, like your actual dissertation committee and your committee chair and what they're comfortable with helping you with. With that said, that is all of that. To answer a question, yes, I can make this PowerPoint available for you because I know it has the links at the end. There are videos I didn't show you through there, so I will make this available and you can feel free to click on those video links. Does anyone have any questions about what we just talked about? All right, perfect. Now, hold on, let me make the note. Where's my other note? Stuff that I'm gonna forget to do when I hang up Zoom. So add Zoom info to Moodle and then upload slides. All right, so before we get started on presentations, let me talk about presentations for just a moment. So in my class, we all interact and we all engage with one another, especially because it's Zoom and I can't tell whether you're paying attention or not. So in order to do that, after each presentation, I expect everyone to have feedback and or questions. And I do call people out, just FYI. So we do engage with one another because a big piece of this class is you also understanding the peer review process and the process to actually become critical. So not a bad critical of each other, but constructive criticism, that's the word I'm looking for. But the goal is, as you are presenting, you should, and as you are learning, as we go through this learning process, you're also learning how and what types of questions to be asking. Because if you can hear someone else's presentation and hear what's missing or what was great and be able to ask questions and give feedback on that, then that means you learn something and you know how to then go back and apply that for your own project. And so throughout this whole semester, anytime we're doing presentations, everyone has questions or feedback to give to the person who presented. And again, I do call people out, and it's usually not one of those, does anyone have any questions? No, it's at the end, who wants to go first with their questions, or, you know, what feedback do you have for so-and-so that just finished presenting? Because all feedback helps you grow as a researcher. And that's our goal in this class, and to do it together. And I tell students all the time, if you feel like I'm hard on you in terms of questions, I'm probably am in the context of class, because we're in class. I want to ask you this stuff in class behind closed doors, so that when you're out front representing SMED or saying that you took 743 from Dr. Jones, you know how to answer the questions that people are asking you. So sometimes I might go hard on questions, but again, it's because we're in class and it's meant to help everyone. Also, when you ask each other the hard questions, then I don't have to say anything. So that's the other benefit of everyone giving feedback and everyone asking questions. So I will take volunteer right now on who wants to do their presentation first.
I'll go first.
Perfect. You can share your screen and get us started on your presentation. Where's my notepad?
Can y'all see it?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, guys, bear with me. All right, so I'm interested in the impact of instructional coaching on student achievement and teacher evaluation. So I've been in the education system for some years now, and we're moving toward more instructional coaching for principals, assistant principals, and master teachers. And I feel like just every year we pick up something new. So let's just see how, I just wanted to see like if this is going to impact student achievement. And I teach at a school, well, I work at a school now where our scores are really just low across the board. So my questions are, what impact does instructional coaching have on student achievement? And I'm going to be looking at the LEAP test. And does instructional coaching significantly improve teacher effectiveness? And so with teacher effectiveness, I'm literally just going to look at their overall rating at the end of the year that deals with test scores and teacher observations. So those are all just a number from like 1 to 4. And does teacher experience factor into the impact of instructional coaching?
Erica,
Yes.
I have a question.
Oh, thanks, Rochelle.
You're welcome. So looking at your second question, how does instructional coaching significantly improves teacher effectiveness? Were you thinking about, and I heard what you said, using evaluations and so on and so forth, but I'm thinking you're probably going for a quantitative type study for your research. Since you're talking about scores, and what about doing their feelings about their either ability or their efficacy in their effectiveness? From
So
that.
I thought about that, and when we looked at the different approaches, and I'm all about feelings, but when I looked at the different approaches, like, and at the end of the day, in the education system, I don't really think they care about your feelings. So I was looking like straight at numbers. And when we talked about like the philosophical worldviews, in my mind, just Erica Augusta's existence in life, I do think there are multiple realities, but I feel like in the field that I work in, there is one reality. Either you producing or you not producing. And that is it. And at the end of the day, like when I'm assessing a child, I do want to give him multiple opportunities to master the objectives. But at the end of the day, like the LEAP is telling me either he knows it or he does know it.
But I'm thinking in my mind too, because there are multiple factors that actually affect the outcome.
Oh, yeah.
So would we be missing a component of that, just looking at scores or evaluations alone? Because in my mind, I'm thinking, even with teacher evaluations, those things have a tendency to get a little subjective, right? Because we look for certain things, but sometimes, never mind, because I'm getting way off.
And I get exactly what you're saying. So as far as like the teacher evaluation for this one, we use the NIET rubric.
Yes.
So we're going to use that rubric with the evidence.
See, my problem is this, Ms. Augustus, because I know how I feel about the NIT. We go to these prepaid curriculum, these prepaid strategies, and we look for these things that they've identified as key indicators.
Practices.
Right. But who actually vetted those best practices as being able to work for all different groups of kids?
That book, Classroom Instruction That Works, John Hattie, Who else do they like to, what else do they like to just throw out?
I'm just
And I
saying.
get it, I definitely get it, but
Don't
this,
necessarily work for all groups of the population. So yes, that may work for
I do.
certain segments of the population, but I was just wondering, but that was just my take on that.
but what you just said, it also kind of made me think of something else too. Even I think the instructional coach will also play an impact on the student achievement and then the teacher effectiveness. Because just because you're an instructional coach doesn't mean you know how to, you know the content or you know how to coach someone else to become better.
Question.
Yes, sir.
What types of strategies do you plan to implement in your instructional coaching intervention features?
So we're gonna do the module studies for the instructional coaching. Also do the feedback cycles and cluster cycles. I don't know if you're familiar with like the NIET. When you get a refinement, the coach is supposed to work with you on your refinement and help you with your reinforcement. And participated in the intervention content leader. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. And so the coaches that will be given the math coaching, they've also participated in what the state calls an intervention content leader program that is supposed to make them kind of experts in the curriculum and the different strategies to move through the curriculum to improve teacher effectiveness and achievement.
How long have the instructional coaches been at play?
To coach this year or just in the education system, period?
In the so wait. You are, so wait, I have all kind of stuff in my head.
Oh no.
There's Dr. Jones, everybody is brand new this year that is hired to be instructional coaches.
For real, say it again. Like, girl, everybody. Everybody.
So do you have comparison groups?
So last year there were no instructional coaches. There were instructional coaches, but they didn't do any instructional coaching. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So
it's like prior to the instructional coaching, we have data, and then after the instructional coaching, we'll have data. Same.
This is the first, so this will be the first year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Oh. Okay.
So in the previous years, everybody likes to say, you know, tier one curriculum. Now we have a tier one curriculum. The scores are going to go up, da, 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 da. But even with these tier one curriculums and this training on this tier one curriculum, whatever they were doing, like the scores were still terrible. So now we're doing, everybody's an instructional leader and an instructional coach, kind of, sort of.
So in the implementation this year, you said everybody gonna be coaching.
When I say everybody, like your leaders on your campus. So we have mentor teachers, we have master teachers, you have a principal and assistant principal.
Are you categorizing the different levels
of instructional coaching? Of instructional coaches? When Rochelle asked that question, that made me think of that. So yeah, I am.
And so the first question she asked, that was kind of one of the questions I have about this number 2. And you talked about the rubric being like what, 1 to 4 or 1 to 10 or 1 to something. The numerical value of the teacher effectiveness rubric. And my what I wrote down was, do these evaluations adequately reflect teacher effectiveness?
Girl, no, indeed. I don't think teachers get whole 4s. And I'm looking at you, so you got a 4 at the end and your data said what?
So how are you gonna account for that? Because like you said, it's really subjective, even though it's a rubric. And in my experience, even and that's why I gave the spiel on peer and self-evaluation, because I use a rubric in the workshop. And what I've seen is students literally be going through to put meets or exceeds the rubric standards. And when I look at the paper, I'm like, it ain't even here. How did this person say somebody met the requirements? And so we know that's how rubrics work. People, above average, exceptional, everybody. And it's like, yeah, no, you're not. So how, and this isn't something you have to answer today, of course. This is something to think about. Like, how do you account for that if you're trying to figure out whether the coaching actually improves their effectiveness or not, when previous to coaching, people were getting higher scores on effectiveness and still had low student achievement scores, excuse me. So that's a thought in terms of, because I don't know how you gonna do that.
Girl, the teachers, according to Louisiana, you are rated effective or ineffective. And in there is what is student performance and your observations. So usually what helps people out is their observations when their scores are still low. Mm-hmm. You can be rated effective emerging and still be an effective teacher in the state of Louisiana. Effective emerging. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. But I'm still, that still begs the question of how are you gonna tease this data out? But I mean, that's something to think about. My other question is, back to your research topic, it's not specific enough. What student achievement and teacher evaluation are you talking about? Who is your, like what level? And how are you incorporating STEM in this? Because SMED is STEM education.
I'm only doing math and science.
Okay, because it don't say that up here.
Okay.
And what
You
what level?
said it in your thing when you did your intro that you were focusing on math.
I'm sorry, say that again.
You actually said it in your intro when you were doing your intro for the assignment. You said math.
Okay, thank you. And I'm only gonna do 3rd through 6th grade.
Okay, because that needs to be up there too. Like, make sure your topic has the pieces in there. Just so whenever you're asking, when you list your questions and stuff like that, your audience will know, what you're talking about. The impact of math and science instructional coaching on what 3rd through, what'd you just say in terms of?
So should I also put like in a rural setting, 3rd through 6th grade?
You sure can.
Okay.
And that could, so your research topic, you want to be focused, and this is for everybody, you want to be focused enough so that we know exactly, what population you're looking at and what content focus you're looking at. This may or may not be your title. You can use it as a working title for now, but really is, what's your research topic? And you should be able to tell us. So what's your research topic?
I want to know the impact of instructional coaching on student achievement and students in 3rd through 6th grade math and science in a rural district. Oh, that was too much. Don't do me that. Let me get off. Bye. You let me write that down. Erase, backspace. Yeah.
So you said the impact of instructional coaching on what students? What?
I don't know. Students in grades 3rd and 3 through 6.
So the impact of instructional coaching on 3rd through 6th grade student achievement and math and science teacher evaluation in a rural school. That's what you said? That's what I heard.
Yeah, girl. Yeah.
That's what I heard.
You sound a little better than me, but yeah, I fired it up. Don't do that.
That's what I heard. That's what I heard.
Yeah, I have to write that down and read that again and stuff, because that's a lot.
That's how we record.
It's not clear.
That's how we record, and it's okay. Because then when you say that, people like, oh, okay, 3rd through 6th grade. All right. I know what grade level you're talking about, a rural school district. Okay. Math and science teachers. Okay, that makes sense. So let's see. I won't call people out yet. Any other feedback for now? Because that was a lot, and I think you got enough.
Thank you. Thank you.
You can return the favor too.
Oh, you going next?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I only have one question.
To start with, that's okay.
I don't have multiple questions. So anyway, my name is Rochelle, and I've been really interested in culturally relevant pedagogy and culturally sustaining teaching practice in a rural classroom. My question is this: how do culturally sustainable teaching practices look in a rural classroom, and what role does culturally relevant pedagogy play in a teacher's competency?
That's more than one question altogether.
It was just a
That and no, that's more than one question.
And actually, Sharma asked the question what perspective that I was taking when I was looking at my research. And I was thinking about it a little bit more, Sharma, to answer your question. I was writing in my notes, and I said I was kind of cross between the constructive worldview as well as a transformative, because when you look at culturally sustaining, change is actually supposed to happen. And how you get people to change and continue to grow even after you've given them, the new way of a new practice of doing it. So I'm somewhere stuck in between there. I had in my mind that I was going to be doing a qualitative type research, but then mixed method may come into play, or I may have multiple types of questions that are open-ended and closed-ended, depending on how well we clean this particular research up. But I had in my mind that it was going to all be qualitative, and
it will. Okay, it's going to be qualitative. So your topic up here, I don't see science, math, engineering.
It was supposed to be in a rural science classroom.
Okay, rural science classroom.
Yeah, let me make that little change right quick.
Well, that was my question, since she took it.
I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry.
Rochelle,
I'm gonna be quiet.
How are you gonna measure teachers' competency?
Basically, because I am doing a qualitative study, I was going to be doing a lot of interviews, a lot of
Wait, in your answer, I'm sorry. How do you define teacher competency? Because you can't tell us how you're going to measure it if you can't define it.
So their ability to use the actual framework from Gloria Ladson and incorporate those components of what she defines as being a culturally relevant teacher. And so their ability to actually incorporate it within their lesson and their comfort level in addressing issues, that's their culturally sustaining part, issues related to the culture that they're really reaching. For example, if you're in a classroom that's all African Americans, your ability to address the social issues that they're experiencing at that particular time, and not shy away from that issue, but at the same time, give the content and still be able to give them a platform where they have a voice and be able to make changes within their community. I know this all sounds really like nice, and people believe if they talk about Black history, once or twice, or they do a few culturally use cultural words or start using slang with kids, that they're thinking that they're culturally relevant. It's a little bit deeper than that. And the culturally sustaining part goes a little bit further, where you're actually equipping the students to make the changes that they want to see in their society. And not everybody's comfortable or equipped to actually do that. So using her framework is how we're going to evaluate the teacher's level of competency.
Will you also include like your Hispanic students? Because I know you're in a rural district coming down, and y'all, we basically have kind of similar populations. We're getting a lot of Hispanic babies, and then the migrant workers. So will your the pedagogy work for those students too?
Yes, culturally relevant pedagogy is not just about African-American students. That's a misconception that it only works for African-American. It's basically understanding the culture that is in your classroom. You don't have to know every little holiday or anything like that. And it's more or less understanding and reading the people that are in your room. So it works for Hispanic, it works for Asian, wherever you, wherever your service groups are is where you meet them at.
Question.
Yes.
Question.
Yes.
How do you train teachers to be culturally sensitive in their instructional practices?
It takes a lot of reflection and a lot of evaluation of yourself. And then after you realize, whether or not your sensitivity is there, you have to pretty much want to change. It's a self, it has to do with the person. And I say that everybody is not equipped to do that work, because if you don't recognize that, culture plays a big role in the learning process, then it's a loss for you. Because right now we're having this big debate about critical race theory. I don't know if people have been keeping up with that. And I think the people who are having a problem with it is simply because they're not ready to accept that culturally we do have some differences.
This is a supplement to the actual content of the class.
Right. This is more or less the practices and understanding how culture plays a role in the way students learn.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good question.
Mm-hmm. Rochelle, are you going to be doing the observations?
Yes, hopefully.
And I'm just asking this question. You know how when you go in classrooms, everybody put on a show.
Mm-hmm.
Like, will you be able to tell, like, if you're just putting on a show because I'm coming in here to observe, or is this really just a part of your classroom culture?
That's a beautiful thing about culturally relevant pedagogy, because there are certain criteria. If I'm coming in your classroom and you don't know what I'm going to be looking for, it'll show, because most people, when you come in to do an evaluation, Ms. Augustus, as a principal, they're not trying to bring in the cultural aspect of it. They're too much focused on the content of what they're trying to get across, or these indicators that you
motivating students and making it relevant is an indicator on my end.
It is, but how many of them actually focus on that portion of it? And then my question is too, the person who's doing the evaluation, how relevant are they? I mean, how versed are they in culturally relevant pedagogy? So to me, if you say something that for kids, if you bring it to the level or use their slang, that for that person, that they're being culturally relevant. That's it. The kids understand it, they're good with it. That's culturally relevant. And it's more than just using slang. So as somebody going in to observe, I would not say this is what I'm looking for. I'm going to just be looking at the practice day to day. And then we can also do videos. I mean, I can go back and look at different types of video of a lesson, without me actually physically being in the room and actually observe their ability of bringing culture into the lesson. Guys, please ask me questions, because in my mind, I'm thinking that I have it together, but I may not have it together.
Rochelle, I was just thinking how it'll look like in math classroom. I'm not a math.
Have really any questions or anything.
Right.
And I run from numbers. I am not that person. But all jokes aside, culture plays a big role because I mean, you look at how kids, for me, for example, you look at certain types of kids and you automatically assume that they should be really good in mathematics, right? Based on their culture. And that's a misconception. And because we have that misconception, we lose a lot of kids in math that we can probably do some things that actually get kids to actually enjoy. For example, you see an Asian kid, you automatically assume that they should be really good in math because typically we have the stereotype that Asians are good in the sciences and the math. But what if you have that struggling kid? What if you don't understand that this struggling kid is working the store and not really spending the time on the concept that they're struggling with? And you see that all those things bring it in because it's not so much the focus on no math concept, it's going home and being able to work and provide for the family. Those are the things that you look at. And so it's not just doing a few little games or using a few little terminologies to say that you're culturally relevant. It's just knowing your environment and the people that you're trying to teach.
Thank you.
So back to your research topic that's up here. How do you how do you refine this research topic to give more information? Why am I here?
How am I going to refine my topic to give more information?
Like, what's the population?
Oh, middle school.
Is it, and you're limiting this to middle school?
Yes.
Okay.
For right now, yes, because that's what I have access to. Even though I'm on a high school campus, my schedule doesn't necessarily coincide with the high school side.
And what else? Because this isn't telling us the complete story, right? I don't see anything about the teacher's competency in here. So how do you?
I'm gonna have to rework this here topic to work that into it. Because you're trying to make me have a 2-sentence topic. This is long.
I mean, but you want to make sure that your topic, now, again, the topic doesn't have to be your title. However, if I'm asking what's your research topic, it needs to encompass all of the information because this is what's going to help you know how to set up for your literature review.
Okay.
And so not that everyone needs to start with impact, but the impact of culturally relevant pedagogy and culturally sustaining teaching practices on middle school science teachers' cultural competency.
Okay.
Something like that. And you gotta work on the multiple questions you have with this one question mark here.
Okay.
Remember, and again, these are just draft questions to kind of help guide you because there's a whole chapter on research questions and resources that you're going to get on how to refine research questions based on whether they're quantitative research questions or qualitative research questions. But one of the points to think about up front is you think about data collection as you think about the research questions. And if you look at this question that you have, you already know there are multiple data collections here. And that should give you a clue that means there's multiple questions in here. So looking at culturally sustainable teaching practice in itself is one question. The role that the pedagogy played in cultural competency is a whole different research question. That's a whole different focus. And there is another question in here that actually needs to come before that second piece to think about. But yeah. Okay. I think you got enough feedback for today too.
Yes, but I'm writing.
Mhm. Who's up next?
I'll go, Dr. Jones.
Perfect. Thank you.
Can you give me the permission to share,
I'm
please?
stop sharing.
There you go.
Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Sure can.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so my topic is focusing on the Tier 1 curriculum. I know there were a lot of questions from Mr. Sharma about the Tier 1. I had given the reply, I don't know whether you had a chance to see it, Mr. Sharma. So my focus is on the curriculum and unpacking of the standards. And it has been my focus in my current role as a master teacher because most of the time the teachers not having the mastery over the content or not understanding the standards properly was a major issue in our district. The LEAP results came last month, and I could see some connections between the practices that they followed in their classroom with the LEAP results. So I thought like I would focus on the curriculum. And even though I'm focusing on curriculum, it is connected with teacher effectiveness and student achievement. So the topic is an investigation of Zern math curriculum and its design in rural elementary schools of Southern Louisiana. My first research question, it is not a final research question, but like it is a working, it is a live document. What are some best pedagogical practices within the curriculum, within the Tier 1 prescribed curriculum that help the teachers to improve student achievement or outcome? If you look at the curriculum, I think you can see like there are several practices already mentioned. For example, think, pair, share, or redraw, the cube strategy, whatever it is. But the curriculum that I've chosen, the Zern Math curriculum, there are several practices given, but I want to test it out and see whether one practice is better than the other practice. But the topic will be the same, but to bring an idea to the teachers and the districts and the leaders, if the teachers follow this or that practice, it will yield good results. And the second question is, how do the various digital tools within the curriculum help the teachers to remediate or differentiate the lessons? So I think another focus is on the remediation. A lot of students have been struggling with the math foundations due to several reasons at our district. The teacher retention rate is so high at our district. Even now we have like a big shortage. So some of them, when they come, they just leave due to several reasons, maybe like teacher salary or several other reasons. I can talk about the whole day, but so the major issue is like teachers and the students not having the teacher consistently throughout the year has made a lot of issues with regard to learning the math foundational skills. So that's why I wanted to focus on the remediation part as well, how the teachers can remediate using the same digital tools within the curriculum so they can bring good results at the end. And third, question is predominantly focusing on the curriculum study PD. But again, the teachers, especially for example, if you look at the high school right now, we have a big shortage. But so like the professional development has been in a, like even though we give the consistent professional development, the job embedded PDs every week, teachers leaving in the middle, and then when we have new teachers, again, we have to train them all over from the beginning. So I want to see just at least with one or two teachers who have been there, working there several years, to see whether the curriculum study PDs are helping them to bring good student outcomes. And the fourth question is, what impacts do the educational level, preparation time, and teaching experience have on teachers' attitude towards Tier 1 Zern math curriculum? The Tier 1 curriculum, teachers had different attitude or different perspectives about this curriculum. For example, some may say, oh, this is not going to work. Eureka Math is not going to work because it's just too high for my kids. Or they may not have any prior experience in teaching the curriculum or teaching the subject itself. So I want to see the connection, whether their attitude towards the Tier 1 curriculum is having any impact with regard to the preparation time or the teacher experience or the educational level. So I want to see the impact of these three factors with the teacher's attitude towards the Tier 1 curriculum.
I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
How are you gonna measure their attitudes? Is it gonna be qualitative or? I'm just asking because when I was doing my in 741, when I did a project, that was one of the questions. How you measure attitudes? How are you gonna measure it?
For now, I was thinking about only the Likards, not having the open-ended questions. I still need to do more research on this, whether attitude should include the open-ended questions. But for now, I'm thinking of only a rating kind of questions, like agree, disagree, those kind of survey questions is what I'm thinking in my mind right now.
Okay. All right. That was just one of the things I was looking at. I'm not familiar with the Zern, the Tier 1 Zern math curriculum, but that was just one of the things I was looking at.
Okay.
So your questions are all over the place. I'm sorry. I want you to tell us which, what do you want to focus on based on what we talked about in terms of philosophical worldview and what you're thinking your approach would be, plus the problems that you are seeing at your experience level. Like, these questions are not related to one another in a sense that they wouldn't all be in one project. Like, these questions are different, and each one could very well lend themselves to their own full project. And so and this also goes to the research topic. So what is it about the curriculum that you really want to focus on?
I do agree with what you said. I was just putting a few questions whether I should focus on both the teachers and the students. If you look at the third research questions, I think it is predominantly focusing on, so the third one is focusing on the curriculum study PD. I was also thinking about changing the student achievement to the teacher effectiveness or teacher competency. But to answer your question, like in my mind, what I'm thinking right now is like definitely the quantitative approach is what I'm thinking in my mind. Of course, each question is like can be done as a separate project. I will definitely remove some of them and I'll try to see the connection. But if you look at the first question, the whatever the pedagogical practices mentioned within the Zern math curriculum, for example, 50-50 model, or the small group lesson or the independent digital lessons. So the design of the curriculum is that the teachers have to teach small group lesson for 30 minutes and then 30 minutes the students have to do the independent digital lessons. But it has been an issue with regard to the classroom management because when they have to do the independent digital lessons by themselves, after that, they have to switch 50-50 model. So one group will go to the teacher and then the other group will go to the computer stations. So there has been issues like classroom management when they during the switch, or the time factor has been an issue. So that's why I wanted to focus predominantly on the pedagogical practices. Like what about just not having the 50-50 model, just deliver the instruction to the whole class and then give the independent digital lessons using the laptop afterwards. So whether that will make a big impact on the student achievement. So I want to see those practices within the curriculum. And I'm also thinking of choosing some math topics so that I can eliminate some of them so I can connect the questions more. I don't know whether I answered your question.
So you're saying your focus is the pedagogical practices.
Mm-hmm.
So this is me just asking questions like I asked. You just named some pedagogical practices from the curriculum, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming they're listed there because they help improve student achievement and outcome.
Can you repeat the last one, please?
The ones that you just named that are listed, I'm assuming they're listed there because they have been shown to improve student achievement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 50-50 model is what they have prescribed.
So technically you just answered question number 1.
No, but I did not specifically mention because the 50-50 model has been an issue for the teachers, whatever prescribed in the curriculum. Even the principals don't believe in that 50-50 model. So I'm going to experiment another model, like other than use the same curriculum, but like instead of 50-50 without switching, deliver the instruction to the whole class, and then the independent digital lessons will be done after the whole group instruction. So
I understand what you're saying, but what I'm trying to get you to see is how you have to watch how things are worded in order to truly convey what you're trying to do, right? Because based on the question, the 50-50 that you're just talking about is, and you listed, I think, 2 more, but those are the best pedagogical practices that help teachers to improve student achievement. And so the way this question is worded and what you told us, that question is already answered. And so when you're thinking about the way you word questions and what you're truly trying to get accomplished, you have to think about how you present it, right? And so, and that may be, you need to be more specific that, yes, those could be identified as best pedagogical practices in the study populations that they were tested in, but you're saying that doesn't work for yours. And so your question is more so related to which pedagogical practices work best to improve student achievement in the population of the students that you are working with. So whether that's in rural elementary school students in Southern Louisiana, that we may not have an answer for.
Gotcha.
I had a question along the lines of that kind of sort. I just wanted to, I guess it's a clarifying question. I heard you say like behavior, but I never heard you say anything like academics. So is it the practice of the 50-50 model that's keeping them from improving, or is it their behavior that's keeping them from improving, like their whole classroom culture?
Oh, not the behavior. Actually, not just that. That is just one factor that I mentioned. But the teachers don't think that that is making a big impact on the student outcome. So that is one of the factors that I said. But the time is wasted, or I'm not able to focus on, like this group of students more because the small group lesson. Actually, the whole design is like they are supposed to have 70 minutes. So there was a time factor as well. So I want to, basically they were saying 50-50 model is like, I told you one reason, but there are several reasons they've been mentioning, or there is a common disbelief that, 50-50 model, which is prescribed in the curriculum, is like not working for us. So can we do this or that? So I want to do an experiment to see, instead of the 50-50 model, just deliver the instruction to the whole class, and then give the independent practice on the laptop after 30 minutes of the whole group instruction, versus just teaching for one small group for 30 minutes and then another 30 minutes, switch the group. So it's like a double dose, right?
I get what you're saying, because we use the same curriculum, and I have been
really?
highly trained in Zern and all this other stuff. I get exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, the curriculum says it is giving actually double dose to the students. So they got like they practice and do the same thing over and over, like 2 times in the same class time. But the teachers and the leaders have been citing several reasons. One was like while switching, the time is wasted, or we don't have time. So can we just do the whole group instruction, So I want to see whether that's going to make an impact on the student outcome. Does it make sense?
And I have one more question. I was just confused. I guess I wasn't clear about when you said in design, an investigation of Zern math curriculum and its design. And I'm familiar with the program, and I didn't know like what part of the design you were, I guess, specifically speaking of. But now that you said like the 50-50, the teaching model, I know exactly what you're talking about now, the prescribed teaching model.
Yeah, so there are like several tools, right? Like a Tower Alert.
Right, and I didn't know which part of that you were speaking of. So is it the teaching model, or is it the way the independent lessons are formatted?
But I'll be considering all the tools, all the designs. Most of the designs, if you look at—
Would that be instructional design?
Yeah, that will come under the second one. You see, how do the various digital tools within the curriculum help the teachers to remediate the lessons? So
could you do a comparison, John Paul?
Say it again, ma'am.
Could you do like a comparison of the different methods? See which one is more effective?
So I can say like fluency, right? If you take the fluency, there are like several fluencies they have. For example, I think lower level number bond or number build, so you can compare different kinds of like fluency. Before learning multiplication, for example, they need to know the addition. So the repeated addition, right? So there are like different kinds of fluency tools available within the curriculum, within the digital platform. So that is one thing, fluency, and then the sprints are there. And then when it comes to the delivery part, it's like, I think one is called Math Chat, and the other one is called Z-Lab, and all those kind of tools.
No, but I was more or less, I guess in my mind, I was thinking when you said the small group as opposed to the whole group type of instruction, could you look at that particular aspect of whether or not one particular model is more effective? So for me, you're saying the teachers don't like the transition between small group to small group. They prefer to do whole instruction, right?
Mhm.
And I guess in my mind, you're trying to see or advocate for one model over the other as being more effective in improving the students' comprehension of the material.
Exactly.
So would it be easier, or I shouldn't even say that word with Dr. Jones on the call, but would it be easier to look at, you know, the outcomes using either or, and decide whether or not one particular mode of instruction is more effective than the other?
Yeah, that is what basically I'm trying to see, whether 50-50 model is yielding more results or like the whole group instruction is yielding more results. Then I can, take it to the leaders and say, hey, whatever is prescribed by the ZERN 50-50 model is like producing more result. So it is better to stick with this model,
Right.
So I think your questions need to be more specific in that sense. And the last two, it just doesn't sound like are relevant to what you are describing that you want to do. The second one, I'm not exactly sure how that's gonna play a role in what you want to do, because if you truly structure this first question the way it needs to be done, I think you're going to have all the data that you need to write a dissertation. Because in order to truly have an understanding of, if you're looking at two different practices, and to truly have an understanding of the impact of these two different practices on the students, it needs to cover multiple math concepts within that. And I would argue that, one, having student achievement / outcome, my question to you, and you don't have to answer this today, would be, well, how are you defining student achievement? How are you defining student outcome? And why is it a / there? Like, which one are you focusing on? Because you could have two different questions, one that focuses on student achievement, and perhaps something else that focuses on student outcomes with a very specific definition of what you mean by student outcomes versus student achievement. Because while we know numbers are important and the achievement, I'm assuming you're talking about the test scores, but it would also be in terms of, I guess, conceptual understanding and looking at how they're performing throughout the school year using these two different pedagogical practices, as well as how they perform on high stakes testing. That would be my assumption. But all of that, like, to truly develop a study, because you're saying it would need to essentially be a controlled experimental study or quasi-experimental. And to truly do that the way it needs to be done, it's gonna take a lot to think through the process and actually develop it the way it needs to be done, and to manage all the data that you would get from that. And I don't know how the other questions, how that could help with that. Now, perhaps there could be a way where, the remediation and differentiation plays a role in that, but you would have to make a case for why that would be important in the midst of understanding the best practices, because those are really two different topics. When you talk about remediation and differentiation, that's a whole field by itself, right? And then when you're talking about best practices, we know we're talking about best practices for all students in general, with an understanding that some students do need remediation. Some students do need more individualization than other students. So there could perhaps be a way to incorporate that into what you want to do with question 1. But I think you need to really sit down and kind of think through that a little more to figure out how you could incorporate that into that without having to do a whole separate study. It needs to be a piece that's incorporated into the data collection that you would be doing to truly answer the first question. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So basically you're saying there are like several topics in my research question. So one is like my curriculum study PD, and the other one is focusing on the teaching experience, and the one is focusing on mediation, and then the other one is, so basically you're saying pick one and then elaborate and then go from there, right? So that basically whatever the research questions I'm asking or I'm putting forth should have some connections.
Absolutely. And based on what you've told us, it sounds like the research problem that you are focusing on is this problem or the issue. Remember, problem is issue that's connected to the practices that are not working in the classroom. I haven't heard you talk about any of the rest of this. So when you were giving us, like when you were describing what you wanted to do, and when I asked you, okay, so what do you want to focus on? You immediately went to the issues with the practices and what's not working. And so that, it sounds like that's where the passion is. And perhaps that's where your focus should be, and you developing your project based on that.
Got you.
Question.
Go ahead.
I finished? Well, I didn't know. Should I continue?
Yes.
Okay, question. How does the teacher's attitudes towards this math curriculum influence students' academic performance? What's the link?
You're asking question based on the last one?
Yes, number 4.
Yeah, but I'm connecting the teacher's attitude towards the tier 1 curriculum, depending on their, whether there is a connection with their educational level, or is that an impact based on the preparation time or teaching experience? But here I'm not connecting with the student achievement.
So what's the goal? Like, an attitude could be neutral, positive, or negative, but the teacher could be an excellent teacher and still accomplish the ultimate goal of improving students' academic performance. So what's the, I guess, the primary objective of studying teachers' attitudes towards the curriculum?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand your question.
Like, how does teachers' attitudes, I mean, I guess the ultimate goal is to improve student academic performance. Is that not right? So I guess what role does teachers' attitudes towards this curriculum, towards this math curriculum, how does that influence students' academic performance?
Because without the teaching experience, or like if for a first year teacher, they don't know anything about Zern math, right? So I want to see like whether any of their prior experience in the curriculum is going to make an impact on the student achievement. And also their attitude towards the tier 1 is like, some of them, we don't need to follow this tier 1, we can just pick from any internet like Amazon or any other curriculum or any other resource. So their attitude is like, some of them, because when I deal with the, with these kind of issues, they just say like, why do we need to follow this? Can I just?
So let me interject. How does this play a role in understanding more about pedagogical practices? Is it important for you to focus on that?
Yeah, I didn't think about connecting the last one with the first one. Yeah, that's a good question. So,
and I'm saying you don't have to answer this because
okay,
we still have 3 people that need to go.
Yeah, to be honest, I was looking at all these 4 questions like separately, and I didn't think about connecting all these 4.
You were planning to do 4 different dissertations?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so yeah, you picked one focus because Otherwise, you got to do a whole different literature review that focuses on teacher attitudes and teaching experiences and how that connects.
Gotcha.
That's a whole separate can of worms. And likewise, the curriculum study professional development, that's a whole separate, again, literature review on teacher professional development and the importance of that in terms of student achievement.
Mhm.
So you have to think through that. What is the problem? And how are your research questions connected to that problem? And they all do need to connect to one another to be one cohesive study.
Gotcha.
Make sense? All right.
So,
And
no, I think I answered the question. I'm not sure.
you answered it, but I don't think you needed to answer it unless you're going to focus on something with teacher attitudes. And if you're going to do that, then the top doesn't make sense. So,
Gotcha.
and the same with your research topic, that the same thing that I said to Erica and Rochelle, you need to be more specific in that, because right now it just said it's an investigation of the curriculum and its design. So what about it? You know, is it really determining the best pedagogical practices using Zern math curriculum and its instructional design in, or something along those lines? Or what is the focus of this work? Because that helps you with your questions as well, because it gives you direction. And you have to be more specific in that research topic, again, to help you with the literature review, because you can't, it's not possible to do a literature review for all 4 of these different questions, because again, those are 4 different projects. And we don't have that kind of time. We only have 16 weeks in the semester. So really think through, you know, the next couple of days of what direction you want to go in, so that you can know which direction to focus on for the literature review.
Gotcha.
All right, thank you. Who's going next? We getting some really good conversation.
I'm going next.
Perfect.
Let's see. I think Josh, you gotta stop sharing.
Let me stop right here. Got it?
Okay, yeah, I can see my screen.
Almost.
You see it now?
Not yet. It just says you started screen. There we go. Now we do.
Okay, I might have cheated a little bit because mine was the impact of technology on passing the NCLEX exam. And that's what it said on in the when I submitted it, but it's on the undergraduate senior students at Southern University Baton Rouge School of Nursing. I did a thesis before, and my thesis, I just wanted to revisit it, because when I did it, it was the effects of computer assisted instruction on the NCLEX, on the comprehensive exam. But now that we're no longer requiring students to take the comprehensive exam, I was going to review the impact of technology on passing the NCLEX exam. The reason I'm looking at the technology, because
Wait, pause. I'm sorry. While I'm thinking about it, I want you to take out SUBR School of Nursing.
Ah, okay. All right.
Because as you refer to it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I will take it.
Nursing and at an HBCU, or, you know, in
See it now?
Some, yeah. So
okay, I'm taking it out.
And I'm saying that now just so you can remember.
Right there.
No, you can leave undergraduate senior students. We need to know that, but
okay.
I don't want you to tell us it's at SUBR School of Nursing.
Okay.
Because I want you to get in a practice of having some anonymity with your population.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Better?
Go ahead.
All right. So what I was saying that when I did my thesis, I looked at computer assisted instruction, but like I was saying, I wanted to look at the NCLEX exam. And one of my questions was, does computer assisted instruction technology enhance the undergraduate nursing students' performance on the NCLEX. And one of the things that over here in the School of Nursing that we look at is the amount of time that students utilize computer technology. They have the Kaplan technology software that they use, and they have ATI software. And that was one of the questions. Then also the other question, is there a difference between traditional and remote instruction on the baccalaureate nursing graduates' probability of NCLEX success? Because of the pandemic, our students, you know, they were used to the traditional, and then we had to go remote. And some students were like, oh, you know, I need face-to-face. So that might be two different projects, Dr. Jones. I was looking at that question while y'all were talking. I'm like, oh, that might be two different projects. So, but my focus is increasing our NCLEX scores because, as you know, some people think that the NCLEX exam doesn't have anything to do with the university or the School of Nursing. But if our NCLEX exam scores go down, that's you know, that looks bad on the school, and our passage rate will go down. So that's what my focus is. And I had looked in the past at several different variables like GPA, the comprehensive predictor scores. But I was just sitting there thinking while y'all were talking, I was like, well, which way I'm gonna go with this? So several different variables. I did quantitative when I was in master's program. So I'm a numbers person. So anyway, give me y'all feedback. Don't cut it up.
Hello, Ms. Renee.
Question. Well,
Wait,
someone else.
hold on. I think Devender was jumping in.
Yeah. Hello, Ms. Renee. What is NCLEX? What is the full form of it?
I can't understand. What did he say?
NCLEX.
NCLEX, he's asking the expansion of.
That's the National Council Licensure Exam. You take it, when you graduate from the undergraduate nursing program, you take that licensure exam in any state that you want to. You get to and practice as a registered nurse. So that's what it is. In order to practice as a registered nurse, you have to take that exam. So, and what we do, we give like predictors in our, here at the School of Nursing, comprehensive predictors that we look at, and they give you the probability that the student will pass or not. So I have some data, we collect data every semester that, that tell the students, oh, you might, this is your probability that you will be successful on the licensure exam. So that's what it is. It's National Council Licensure Exam. Once you pass it in any state, you can practice in another state. It's just like getting a driver's license. Once you learn how to drive, you can go take you don't have to take the exam again. You just go apply for the license.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Renee.
Okay.
Question.
Okay.
In your research study, do you plan to focus on Kaplan's academic curriculum or Southern's nursing academic curriculum?
Well, Kaplan is one of the softwares that they utilize in the School of Nursing. So there are several different variables that I was going to look at. I was going to look at the Kaplan because they divided like the adult health, the pediatric, the basic nursing. So Kaplan is just an overall exam that tests different areas that the students take. Like they take medical, surgical, they take adult health, they take pediatrics, they take geriatrics. So each level, they have a percentage of how they score. So Kaplan is just a software. Now, when you talk about the university, I was going to look at variables like students taking biology and anatomy, how many times they take that course, say like if they repeat it. So there's different variables that I was going to look at because when we admit students, we look at different their scores. and we say, hey, you know, their GPA, we look at the GPA, we look at the ACT, and we look how many times they take a course. So some of the variables in the curriculum, I was gonna utilize those. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, because I know Kaplan is a test prep company.
Right,
They
right,
prepare you for
right.
tests. So,
Right,
but I
right.
guess you have some sort of agreement. I guess nursing school has some sort of agreement with Kaplan to provide instruction to students. I'm guessing. I don't know.
Yes, we do.
You do. Okay. Thank you.
Was it just Kaplan or was it another?
It's another, we use ATI and Kaplan. So that's what I'm trying to figure out which one I'm going to look at. So that's another thing that I need to focus on.
So students don't have to actually like go individually and purchase this from Kaplan or ATI. It's
no, the university is part of their lab fee.
Oh, okay. Because that's not common in other, like, in biology or other places. I mean, that you have to go on your own if you want to take a course with Kaplan.
If you look at their lab fee, well, you'll see, yeah, students know they're paying for it.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Ms. Milligan. So you said this was after they graduate from Southern, right?
Right. But the NCLEX is right after they graduate from Southern.
Will you be able to keep a track of your participants after they graduate, if they leave and move somewhere else?
Yes.
To determine if they passed like the first time or the second time, or?
Yeah. Yes, we get the report.
Okay. And will you look at how many times they've taken the test?
They give us that as well.
Okay.
You have instruction and technology in this first question. Is that why do you have them both there?
Because I think when I did my thesis, it was computer assisted instruction. So I think I need to take that out and put does technology. That's what I was typing so fast. But I mean technology.
Why
assisted instruction? When I did my thesis, they called it CAI, computer assisted instruction.
Okay. So as you do the literature review, just take note of the terminology that's used and align the words in your question to match what's used in the field.
Okay.
And yes, those two questions are two different studies.
I'm not gonna do two dissertations, I guarantee you. I thought about it when y'all were talking, I was like, oh my God.
However, so in terms of NCLEX preparation, are the only option these two computer assisted programs, or is there a paper-based option?
Well, since COVID, we've been doing a lot of ATI and Kaplan. Those are the only two that we use. Now, there is another one that we used to utilize. It was HESI, but we're not using that one anymore. We use ATI and Kaplan.
Okay. I think this first question is a good start.
Okay.
But my question to you would be, what else are you doing? Because you can get the data and run like one stats analysis and answer this question.
Okay.
So what else are you?
I need to, okay.
You hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. And some of this might come out as you're doing the literature review, right? So, and that's why we start with the literature review and not actually start with questions. The only reason I asked for questions was to see what direction you're going in. And so we start with the literature review because as you are reviewing the literature, you're going to start noticing more and more information. And as you identify the gap in the literature, it may help you structure your questions and in more detail and of your whole study.
Okay. Give me some work to do. Okay.
Oh, you're gonna have a lot to do. Thank you. Who's
Okay.
next? We got 2 people left. Let's get this done.
Oh, let me stop sharing. Oh,
Mr. Sharma, Mr. Rapolu,
Yes, I'm here.
is that right?
So how do you do this? 1 second.
You see the green button at the bottom that says share screen?
I only have buttons on top. I see a top, there's a green called share content.
That may be it.
Okay, so click on that.
I hope so.
Okay, I clicked on it. It says screen, photos, Dropbox, OneDrive. I'm guessing screen.
I know
It's
yours
giving me
does.
an option. So I guess share screen, share screen. Okay, I clicked on it. Screen broadcast.
I don't see it. Within the Zoom, is
Uh,
something at the bottom that says share screen?
it says start broadcast. I clicked on it and it's
Oh, wait, something's happening.
something happening.
Yeah, we see screen
Yeah.
broadcast. Okay, go to your presentation.
Go to my presentation.
Yeah. Maybe we can see it from there.
Can you see it?
I think it's coming up. We're a little
Okay.
delayed. Yeah, it says it's opening, so. Okay,
Can you see it?
we sure can.
Okay, so my research topic is investigating the strategic implementation of retrieval practice and concept mapping for improving students' academic performance in undergraduate biology courses. And my research question is, will there be significant mean differences in student academic performance defined as final numerical grades percentage across the 2 educational intervention conditions, namely retrieval practice and concurrent retrieval practice and concept mapping, when adjusted for the covariate of ACT scores?
Okay, so tell us a little bit about what you plan on doing.
So I plan to utilize the statistical technique of analysis of covariance to determine the academic effectiveness of the learning technique of retrieval practice compared to concurrent retrieval practice and concept mapping. So comparing these 2 strategies as they apply to improving academic performance in undergraduate biology courses, specifically introductory undergraduate biology courses.
Okay. Questions? Feedback?
So it's quantitative. It's essentially, it'll be very quantitative. So it's post-positivist philosophical worldview, quantitative method, and analysis of covariance is a statistical technique. Are you still there?
We're here.
Okay, just wanted to be sure I didn't disconnect.
I just had a quick question of what do you mean when you say strategic implementation?
Well, the strategy that will be so the strategy essentially is concurrent retrieval practice and concept mapping. That's one way of strategically studying these 2. So there's retrieval practice, which alone has been proven to improve academic performance, and there's concept mapping, which has also been proven to improve academic performance. So if you were to have concurrent retrieval practice and concept mapping, so that's one strategy. There may be other ways of studying these 2 techniques. So that is the strategy part, strategically implementing. There may be other ways of other strategies that can be used to organize these two learning strategies while learning techniques. So I guess to accomplish to achieve maximum student performance.
And for this, somebody else was gonna say something.
Yeah, I
Go ahead.
was wondering, like, how do you connect this with the covariate of ACT scores? So,
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so ACT scores, it's a way of controlling for external variables. So to ensure that the observed academic performance is actually due to retrieval practice and retrieval practice plus concept mapping, which are the independent variables. To ensure that the observed result or improvement in student academic performance is actually due to the independent variables or the educational interventions, can extract the influence of external variables such as ACT scores, which I'm using as a determiner of pre-existing academic achievement. So to ensure that the result being observed is due to the intervention of the experimental intervention, which are retrieval practice and concept mapping, and not due to external factors such as pre-existing academic achievement of the students, which as measured by ACT scores, because ACT scores have multiple, I mean, they have math, science, English, so it can be used as a determiner of students' pre-existing academic achievement prior to the administration of the intervention of retrieval practice and retrieval practice plus concept mapping.
Gotcha. So here your dependent variable is the student academic performance. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
As measured by final numerical grades percentage.
So is there any like a kind of like a final exam kind of thing? Can I compare that with the final exam?
I guess the final numerical grade in the course. So it's like final numerical grade, for example, like 99% or 95%. Their final numerical grade.
But I'm wondering about the nature of the assessment piece that you're giving as part of student academic performance. So
well, the actual course, the grade in the course.
Oh, okay.
The exam, like exam 1, exam 2, exam 3, exam 4, exam 5.
It is not just like one final exam. It is like
the final grade, not the final.
The grade in the class.
Gotcha.
So it's not about achievement, it's about performance.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it's not about achievement.
Yeah. Will you have access to that ACT?
I'm sorry?
The ACT scores, you have access to those?
Well, that part is the IRB, and I plan. I hope the registrar's office would have a record of these. I mean, that part, that's an administrative part. I mean, I hope I can get access to the scores, which I believe would be part of the IRB approval, which was mentioned in the textbook. At some point, you have to obtain that. I mean,
yeah, that wouldn't be IRB. So yes, you have to do IRB approval, but whether you have access to the ACT scores or not wouldn't be contingent upon the IRB committee. That is something whether point blank, whether you actually have access to it or not. And I don't know whether that would be institutional research or the biology department or what.
Yeah, because see here we have admission data. And, when I do my research, I have access. So, I just have to give a letter to the chair.
Well, that was one of my questions when I responded to you. Is that Alva, right? Are you Alva? Who just spoke?
Yes, that's me.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I remember. I don't know if you remember, but I responded.
Yeah, I
to
remember
mentioning. Okay. How did you obtain ACT scores for your research? That was one of my. I mean, like how do you go about that? I guess
you're gonna have to get that biology chair department to let you have access to the admissions records. Well, whatever population you're going to be looking at, you're going to have, I mean, it's on the system, but you're going to have to talk to that chair of that department.
The department head.
Yeah.
Right. So you, again, like you said, you will need to have IRB approval. However, you would need to work with the chair in terms of once you get IRB approval, whether they're going to be able to get you the data that you're asking for.
Okay.
And that can be a conversation that's had ahead of time in terms of, you know, once I get IRB approval, are you going to allow me to have access to the specific data that you're looking for? And so based
I do
on
have a question, Dr.
Go ahead.
And maybe I'm just confused about it. So you're looking at the final numerical grades across the two using those particular practices among students, right? So in using the final numerical grade, I guess in my mind, you're assuming that the teachers are all going to do the same type of grading on the same type of information. I mean, I don't know if I'm making sense, but as far as, okay, so sometimes when I grade, you know, teachers sometimes give grades.
I think so, Rochelle, I think your question is kind of connected to how, like, the study population in terms of how the intervention is going to happen. It sounds like you're wanting to know, you know, is this multiple biology courses with perhaps one faculty member has several sections and they're doing these different practices with those different sections, or is it multiple faculty members, or like what's the actual setup that you're thinking about? Because this sounds like it needs to be really close to being an experimental design.
So from my understanding of and personal experience with biology classes, introductory biology classes, they all take the same exams. Well, the majors, biology, introductory biology, there's only one section. And it's like one section which has like 100 or 150 students.
So
and
one
the
teacher?
not, I'm sorry?
One teacher?
What
one
teacher?
Professor?
Yeah.
Dr. Williams, not
Okay.
there's another doctor, it's Dr. George Williams, at least it was until, unless it is. But yeah, so the majors biology and the non-majors intro biology has multiple sections because that enrolls all students from different majors, but all of them take the same exam. So their exam 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they're all taking the same exam. So it's standardized. So the end of their grades, regardless of the section they're in, regardless of the teacher, they all take the same exams. And that their grades are essentially the averages of the 5 exam and the final.
Got it. And so you're going to see if they're going to use these one or the other method to within their classes to see if the students will have a choice in which one of these methods that they're used to actually understand the concept.
Well, for it to be a true experiment, it has to be randomized. There has to be randomized assignment of the research subjects to these educational intervention treatments. So it will be the researcher. That'll be me deciding. Well, have to have a process of randomly assigning research subjects to the treatment options.
So is this done, like, are they choosing to participate in a study and having to do this work outside of class, or what's the vision for this?
So that part, it could be either way, but I mean, I've planned it both ways. One way would be to give instruction to the teacher and ask the teacher to apply this to half of, like, randomly assign, to give them like the retrieval practice to half of the class and the other strategy to the other half of the class. That's one way. The other way would be to have an online, like in Moodle, have this as an optional assignment?
So,
So there are multiple ways that it could be applied. Right?
It
The
is.
best way would be to be in class, like just request the teacher to have, half of the class gets the retrieval practice treatment and the other half gets the retrieval practice with concept mapping treatment.
So you talked about majors versus non-majors. Which one are you focusing on?
It could be both of them, or it could be one of them. It depends on the teacher's approval, because again, they have to agree to participate.
Right. So
And
this is what I'm gonna say. I have 2 points. One point is I think additional demographics for your research questions in terms of variables would be beneficial, especially something like a gender variable. Perhaps when you see what students self-identify as, there could be a difference in their academic performance based on these educational interventions. So it would be interesting to kind of see gender as an actual demographic for the research questions.
okay.
That's one thing. And, perhaps there are some other variables that comes out as you develop the research. So let me stop your share. The other point that I really want to say to you, and Devinder, you can prepare yours to start sharing your screen so that we can get out of here. I know we're a little behind, but again, we're not meeting the next 2 weeks, so I want to get through all of this tonight. But Raul, what I want to say is you need to identify faculty and get permission early on, like with the expectation that you would start this research in the spring semester. You need to have a faculty on board, and you need to go ahead and know whether it's majors, non-majors, like all of those pieces you need to know before you go through this whole semester of designing a project. Because what I've seen in the past is there has been a student or two who have designed entire research projects based on courses that they don't teach. And then they haven't communicated with faculty to figure out these details. And so they finish the class with this whole project design. And then it's like, okay, you can't move forward if you don't have permission from anyone who's teaching this thing in order to do it. So what I would say is really, as you are, going through the literature review the next couple of weeks, one of the other things to do is to make sure that you work with your committee, because I know you already have a committee identified, but to make sure that you also go ahead and identify a faculty and decide on the class as you are also fine-tuning the pieces of the research design, because you want to make sure whatever you design is going to be in collaboration with the instructor of record for the course that you're saying you want to work with.
Okay. So when you mentioned gender, can you hear me?
Yes.
When you mentioned gender, so gender would be an additional independent variable in the study?
That sounds about right. It would be a separate question for you.
Okay, so the role of gender and like how do the educational interventions impact academic performance considering the different genders?
Right. So you can play with the wording, but yeah.
Okay.
Because there may be some other demographics of the students that perhaps could come into play.
Well, for example, like freshman level, some seniors take those classes, they can never pass them. So they wait until their last semester to take them, especially with the non-majors. There are some freshmen, but there are many who are seniors. So that's another one.
Yeah, classification, definitely. I don't know how prevalent honors or AP biology is at the high school level here, but perhaps that's something that can be considered, whether or not the students, because that may actually be a variable that needs to be pulled out.
Okay.
But
Some have taken AP biology, some students haven't taken AP biology, like the college ones.
yeah, and we would assume that the ones who took AP bio, they shouldn't have a problem with, you know, these should be the higher grades towards at the end of the semester. So
Yeah, and
that might be something that needs to be noted.
okay.
But definitely identifying faculty in the course and those details as soon as possible, because I don't want you to design something and then the faculty be like, no, you can't do it. And that's not okay. So we want to make sure what you designed this semester is in collaboration with an instructor of one of these biology courses for the spring semester, so that when spring rolls around, you're able to start collecting your data.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
On my screen, it has this broadcast. I don't know what to do. Like, how do I exit out of it?
I don't know. We can't see it. So
Oh, you can't see it. What do you see from
No.
me? I didn't do anything. You don't see my PowerPoint anymore?
No, I stopped sharing your screen
Okay.
on our end. So we see the vendor's screen.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So I guess I'll just get. Oh,
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
My research topic is on exploring student attitudes using virtual reality in agriculture science courses. These are the research questions. First question is, how frequent is the use of virtual reality in agriculture science courses is being used in order to support the instruction? And the second question is, what are the student attitudes towards using virtual reality in agriculture science courses in general?
Okay, I have a question about number one.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just me, because y'all know I'm a little slow. For this question, you say how frequent?
Mhm.
Could that just be like, oh, they used it 25 times, an average of 25 times, and that's it?
It's not an average. Like there are in agriculture science courses, there are many like various subjects, like the poultry department, like the swine department. So there are different departments in it, and we are and how frequent they are using in that courses.
So once you find out like the number, if you find out they use it 30 times, like what are you gonna do with that
There
number?
are different courses in the agriculture science courses. So let us suppose like poultry course, swine course, and there are different departments. What I mean is, so
I think the question is about and then what? I think is where she's going with this, that once you know the frequency in which they use, which is a number. So like Miss Augustus was saying, let's say 2 of these courses use it 3 or 30 times, and this one course use it maybe 5 times. And then what? Like, what's the research focus for that?
the research focus is to find how convenient the students are using virtual reality in the classroom. And
Repeat that. I didn't hear it. How?
To make sure that students are, while using the virtual reality, how students are like feeling like with the traditional classroom. Because the virtual reality creates like the interactiveness and like real world experience. So using it frequently in the classrooms, we can see the student achievement.
So,
So we're looking at student achievement of a particular concept, or just the overall achievement within
It's
in that
overall
particular
achievement.
course.
Overall achievement of the course.
so go back to your topic. So how does that play a role in what you're saying your topic is here? You just said something about student achievement, but your research topic is talking about student attitudes.
Yeah.
And so the question is, you know, question 1 talks about the frequency of virtual reality in the classes, and then you just said something about student achievement. So how are
I
these
told
things?
that I told that to improve the student progress and achievement. And to check the student attitudes, how the student react using virtual reality in the classroom. What I mean is like how it improves the student performance.
So, I mean, is your research topic gonna focus on performance?
Oh no, it's on student attitudes.
Okay, so if your topic is on student attitudes, then go to your questions, because one of your questions talk about student attitudes, but it still goes back to the first question about frequency and how is that playing a role in student attitudes? Like, why is this question here?
The question because currently the agriculture science department is using virtual reality in the classroom. So I want to add that because they are using in the classroom right now. So I want to add this question because they are frequently using in the classrooms.
But how does that connect to student attitudes in terms of, because your question here is just how frequent is the use of virtual reality in these courses? That's not a research question. That's a let me count and see and I can answer the question kind of question. It doesn't connect to anything that requires like actual research data to be collected and analyzed, more than just a basic count.
Yes, no.
And it doesn't connect to the topic that you just said you were doing.
Yes, no. I will change the question for the first one.
Does anyone have, and remember, you know, the questions we have is to help you think through things, but does anyone have advice or feedback on questions that could work?
Well, I had a Well, I had a question about virtual reality. When you say virtual reality, can you describe specifically what you mean by virtual reality in this case?
Means it's like a classroom experience. Let us suppose you are in a laboratory, so you can experience the laboratory instructions by using the virtual reality devices, by through the virtual reality devices.
So you're
So
referring
you
to a
can
simulation.
yeah, it's a simulation where you can
But-
learn through the
So is it on a computer or is it on a special hardware device?
uh,
It's
it's a civil application. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. It's immersive virtual reality for the students who are on campus, and the students who are off campus is more of an interactive virtual reality. And it's not an actual simulation, but it's a more like a virtual field trip. And the idea is, because of COVID, the students, trying to limit how many people are around each other, it makes more sense to be able to do a virtual field trip of the different farms associated with the agricultural science courses than to actually take the students out there and have them on site.
It's okay.
And then I said it's interactive for the ones off campus because the ones on campus have access to the virtual reality goggles. And so they can put the goggles on and feel like they're actually immersed in the environment, or, in the actual farmhouse, and see the chickens hatching and stuff like that, versus the ones who are off campus. They don't have access to the goggles, but the environment is available as a desktop application. And so they can click and move around, and it's more like a 3D environment for them on the desktop.
Okay.
Panographic.
When I did my 741 project, I did like an analysis of the impact of clinical simulation technology during a pandemic. So I just think maybe you could change the topic and to an analysis of it, of the virtual reality, in agriculture. I'm just thinking out loud. And I just thought, what you think, Dr. Jones? That was just one of my topics that I did. We looked at simulation during the pandemic, clinical simulation.
When you come to the simulation, there are various type of simulation. You can go, there are augmented simulation also, and there is a mixed reality simulation. So there will need to be a specific simulation.
So probably you can think of like which kind of simulation is supporting the student achievement, or is helping the teachers to.
Currently, it's a virtual reality. So they are using the virtual reality devices like the goggles, the handset devices, and they will use the civil application, and it is monitored by the professor, and it is and there is a tablet, and there will be a cell phone which is connected to the head mounted devices, and there are four applications, and there are 4 devices, and it will given to the each section of to the benches, so they can just focus on there. And when the teachers tries to point out something when she's trying to teach about the chemical, she can point out over there, so every student can view what is going on.
Okay. No, are there like different kinds of applications within the virtual reality? Like,
Yeah, it's augmented reality and mixed reality. And the augmented reality,
no, the one for your research, are you going to be using both or just one?
no, only just the virtual reality.
Only virtual reality. Okay.
Yeah, because agriculture science has the devices and the equipment.
Okay. Is it some program already installed in the virtual reality devices?
No, I'm telling it's already being used in the agriculture science department.
Yeah, I know, but like the software or some application,
Yeah, it's a
is
civil
already installed?
application. It's civil, SWIVIEL.
It is
Okay.
not. It is a virtual environment made using a software called ThingLink. So it's basically, I don't know if you've seen like the Google expeditions and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but how you can go and, tour the pyramids in Egypt and stuff like that. It's the same idea, except the faculty in the ag sciences have been able to take their own pictures and create their own virtual field trip.
Yeah. And you can create we have created the poultry the hens hatching and the growth of the chicks to the chicken. So you can record the video and you can show it in the devices. You can upload it on the devices.
Oh, so
Like
the students have to do these programs or do these assignments to go in virtual reality device. It's not already like pre-installed, right? Some virtual reality devices, I've
so,
experienced that once in one of the, I think it was in LAQ, and it was already pre-installed, and the schools buy these devices and then give it to the kids.
yeah, and the 360 by the 360-degree
Camera. Mhm.
cameras, they will take the pictures like it's a panoramic view.
Mhm.
So you can upload in the application and you can show to while teaching. You can tell the students and explain very clearly, just like a real time.
Okay, so your question one is like, how frequent is the use of virtual reality classes used in order to support the instruction? Can you
Yeah,
elaborate? So how frequently, like, so if they use more number of times,
yeah. Actually,
what do you want?
they want to use like when they are teaching, they want to use on the topics more frequently.
Okay, but in
So they
order to
want to
support the
convert
instruction for the teachers or
the
the
top.
student?
Can you say again?
I'm sorry, in order to support the instruction, you said, right? So here the focus is like for the teachers, or I guess you mean the student achievement, I guess, right? If they use more, then they achieve more. Is that what you're trying to focus for question one?
Uh, it's not my focus is on the student attitude.
Student attitude. Yeah, then like Dr. Jones said, then I think number one is not focusing on the student attitude.
Yeah, actually, I need to change that question.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's a lot of feedback. And we're already like 30 minutes over. So I don't want to hold everyone hostage. I do want to, one more thing that I want to do before we get off is real quick. In Moodle, module 2 is already open. You should be able, oh, I didn't reload this, but I'll make sure it should be open for you already. I'll make sure before I get off. I just didn't reload this screen. I did it on the other computer, but module 2, again, you can see that we will be in the lit review for a while. This doesn't mean to wait until September 20th to start going through this because I have it separated by the weeks. And so again, on here, it's a reminder that this next week is online, meaning on the 25th, we will not be on Zoom. But I have here different resources for you, like what you should be reading, different resources for you. And then you have the assignment for you that's there. And you can see the next week is there and the dates. So everything for the next few weeks are already up here. And then all the assignments are already here for you as well. Are y'all still there?
I am.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I am.
My
Yes,
side
ma'am.
screen just disappeared. I'm like, wait, what just happened? Okay. So all of these aren't open. They're not available right now. I think especially the end ones, I only have available like the week before they're due. But you can see, you'll be able to see everything that's here in module 2. So you may not be able to actually upload some of the assignments yet, but you can see everything, and up through here, you can see where it's due, when it's due. I do want to point your attention to number 4 here about citation management software. This is something new that I'm adding because I want you on the front end of things to pick a citation management software and to get comfortable using it. It's going to make your life easier later. The video that I posted about it is number 3 here, and it's comparing the software Zotero with Mendeley. EndNote, of course, is another one. I don't think Southern actually has an EndNote subscription. I don't know. I haven't looked. I just assumed we didn't. So I put the video about these two up because they both have free versions. Personally, I've been using Zotero. And that's what I've been building what I've been using for my reference management. And so I do want you early on, the reason why it's in the beginning here, to go through and actually look. This number 4 reading will take you to a page that also compares the different ones. And it's really just about what you will be comfortable with using. And so you do have an assignment that's related to that, because again, I just want you to be comfortable with using the reference management software. Most of these will integrate with Microsoft Word, meaning as you are typing, you can insert the citations that you have stored in there, and you can set it up where it's APA style and it'll do it for you. You do have to double check because sometimes the formatting is not right. And so I do want you to focus on that. The assignment number 2 here is a literature map. It is in the book. I think in the assignment for that down here, yeah, I tell you what the figure is, and I think I put a copy of that within the assignment. If I didn't, then the figure is still there, so you'll know where to go in the book to look. But the literature map is, and the citation reference management software is really the focus for this next week as you start reading about the literature review and you start gathering your references that you're going to use. Please let me know if you have an issue with trying to find enough references within the time frame. I put not published prior to 2015 because I really want you to focus on recent studies for now. I know you will have some that are published earlier, I know, but from the start, I really want you to focus on recent work, especially because there's been a lot of work that's been published in 2020 and 2021 because of COVID and the impacts of COVID, on various aspects of education. And so I really want you to look at work that's been published within the last 5-6 years or so as a foundation for your lit review. And then you can add in the other older work as well. So I did want to show you this before I go because everything is there. Reminder to copy Dr. Williams on emails if you have questions or issues for me, because as of tomorrow, it'll probably take me a lot longer than 24 hours to respond to anything. And I know for sure I'm not responding to anything over the weekend into mid next week. So at least the next week, I'm probably not opening my work email at all. So please copy Dr. Williams to anything. She has access to Moodle. So if she needs to go in here and look at anything, she will do that. Other than that, does anyone have any other questions or anything before we go?